They called her the most dangerous woman in Europe, a queen at birth, a widow before 20, a prisoner for nearly 2 decades, and finally, a martyr. This is the story of Mary, Queen of Scots, the woman whose life was tragedy from beginning to end. In December 1542, Mary Stuart was born at Linlithgow Palace in Scotland. Her father, King James V, had just suffered defeat in battle. Days later, he lay dying. When the news reached him that his newborn heir was a girl, he whispered, "It began with a lass, and it will end with a lass." 6 days later, he was dead. Mary, barely out of her mother's arms, was Queen of Scotland, but her baby could not rule. The realm was divided. Some lords looked to England, urging marriage to the infant Edward II. Others looked to France, Scotland's ancient ally. And so, at 5 years old, Mary was sent across the sea to be raised at the French court. At the glittering court of Paris, Mary was admired for her beauty, intelligence, and grace. She married the young Dauphin, Francis, binding Scotland and France together. In 1559, he inherited the throne, and Mary became Queen of France. But the triumph was brief. Francis died suddenly a year later, leaving Mary a widow at just 18. Her crown was gone, her future uncertain. And so she returned to the land of her birth, a land far rougher, harsher, and more divided than the France she had known. In 1561, Mary landed at Leith to claim her throne. She was tall, striking, a Catholic queen in a Protestant kingdom. The Scots watched her warily. Some admired her charm and wit. Others whispered that her faith made her a danger. For 5 years, she ruled with skill. But like all Tudors and Stuarts, her greatest weakness was her heart. In 1565, Mary married her cousin, Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley. At first, the match seemed strong. Both were young, attractive, with royal blood. But Darnley was arrogant, jealous, and reckless. Soon their marriage turned sour. In March 1566, Mary, pregnant with her child, was dining in Edinburgh when Darnley and his men burst in. Before her eyes, they stabbed her secretary, David Rizzio, more than 50 times. The Queen was left trembling, her gown stained with his blood. Darnley had crossed a line. Mary gave birth to a son, James, the future James VI. But her marriage was doomed. In February 1567, Darnley was recovering from illness at a house in Kirkhoe Field. One night, an explosion tore the house apart. Darnley's body was found in the garden, strangled. The kingdom was scandalized. Whispers spread. Had Mary plotted her husband's murder? Suspicion fell on the Earl of Bothwell, her close ally. And when Mary married him weeks later, the scandal was complete. The lords rose in rebellion. Mary was captured, imprisoned, and forced to abdicate in favor of her infant son. At just 24 years old, the Queen of Scots was dethroned. Desperate, Mary fled south, to her cousin, Elizabeth Bishops of England. She begged for help, for protection. But Elizabeth saw her not as family, but as a threat. For Mary was the granddaughter of Margaret Tudor, Henry VIII's sister. By blood, she had a strong claim to England's throne. To Catholics across Europe, Elizabeth was a heretic, while Mary was the rightful queen. Elizabeth could not kill her cousin outright, but she could not set her free. And so Mary became what she would remain for the next 19 years, a prisoner. From castle to castle, Mary was moved across England. Her beauty faded, but not her spirit. She plotted, wrote letters, dreamed of freedom. She wove herself into Catholic conspiracies, some real, some imagined, all aiming to overthrow Elizabeth. For Elizabeth, Mary was a living shadow, a constant danger to her throne. In 1586, that danger came to a head. Letters were discovered, messages hidden in beer barrels, written by Mary herself. In them she appeared to approve a plot to assassinate Elizabeth and seize the crown. It was enough. Elizabeth hesitated for months, but in the end, she signed the death warrant. The fate of Mary, Queen of Scots, was sealed. On 8th of February 1587, Mary was led to the great hall of Fotheringhay Castle. She wore crimson, the colour of Catholic martyrdom. She faced her end with dignity, forgiving her executioner. Kneeling at the block, she prayed. The axe fell. The Queen, who had once ruled Scotland and France, was gone at 44. But her story did not end in that hall. Her son, James VI, was raised apart from her, groomed to rule. In 1603, when Elizabeth I died childless, it was Mary's bloodline that triumphed. James became James the Son of England, uniting the crowns of Scotland and England at last. Mary had lost her throne, her freedom, her life. But in death, she won a greater prize, the crown of 2 kingdoms for her descendants. History remembers Mary as tragic, reckless, and fated to fall. A queen at 6 days old, a widow at 18, a prisoner for 19 years, and a martyr in the end. Elizabeth ruled longer, lived safer, and died in her bed. But it was Mary, Queen of Scots, the doomed queen, whose bloodline shaped the future of Britain.